Hey everyone, my name's David Smith. I'm a guitar player, musician from Sydney. Welcome to my YouTube channel. For my first video, I just wanted to introduce myself and tell a little bit of my story and talk about my plans for this channel. So I grew up on the northern beaches of Sydney, where I still live. My parents enrolled me in piano lessons at a really young age. I think I was in the first grade. And I played piano for a couple of years, but what I really wanted to play was the guitar. As far back as I can remember, I was always mesmerized by the look and the sound of guitars. And my parents could see this, and they were always really supportive. So after a couple of years of playing piano, they let me switch to guitar. My first guitar was an Aria nylon string classical, which I loved. And for the first year or so of playing, I took lessons from a teenager in our neighborhood named Joanne. And she did a great job of getting me started and teaching me the names of the strings and the parts of the guitar and simple chords and songs and that kind of thing. But beyond that, she did a great job of sparking my interest and building my enthusiasm and passion for the guitar and music in general. It wasn't long before I got the opportunity to perform, and my first gig was playing and singing Take Me Home Country Roads with my childhood friend Martin, who played the piano. I actually didn't know at the time that it was a John Denver song. I only knew the Olivia Newton-John version. I always loved Olivia, and I had a massive crush on her as a kid. It was one night in our big school hall. They had this evening of music and drama that all the kids were performing in. But we were actually doing it to earn our entertainment badge for Cub Scouts. I remember walking to the stage and the nervousness and the excitement that I felt, and then performing the song, which was just a real high. And then, of course, the applause and the cheers that followed. It was just awesome. The year before starting high school, I worked the whole summer at a cactus nursery to save up enough money for my first electric guitar, which was a black Hondo 2 Les Paul copy. It came with a little practice amp and a curly cord like Jimi Hendrix or Brian May. And I was just in heaven, completely enamored with the sound and the feel and, of course, the look of it. It became obvious pretty quickly, though, that I was going to need some lessons if I was going to get the most out of it. I'd pretty much been playing the same things since finishing with Joanne, and I hadn't really progressed since. So, as always, my parents were very supportive and they organised some more lessons for me. During high school, I had several teachers, but there were two in particular that had a really big impact on me. And their names were Ian and Dennis. And these were the guys that introduced me to players like Eric Clapton, Larry Carlton, Robin Ford, great Australian bands like Cold Chisel. And they really opened my eyes to what was possible on the instrument. I'm so glad I got to learn with them at such a young, formative age. I was so keen and I just soaked up everything that they gave me and played for hours on end. But I never saw it as a chore. I just loved it. I played in lots of bands through high school and into my adult years and just had a blast. And again, my parents were really supportive. I remember Mum used to drive me and my older brother to gigs all around Sydney when we were in bands together as teenagers. He was a great drummer back in the day, and he had this huge Tama double kick kit that had all these toms and cymbals and, it took up the whole stage. It was so impractical, but it looked and sounded awesome. It was epic. My brother actually worked part-time at a local music store. I used to love visiting him at work and seeing all of the guitars and amps and synths and PA systems and things like that. And he was really gracious to let me hang around and soak it all up. And the people that he worked with were very kind to me also. Like older siblings often do, he introduced me to a lot of music, which I was grateful for. But out of all of the artists that he showed me, the three that I fell in love with were Van Halen, Journey, and Toto. Man, those bands became the soundtrack to my life. I was absolutely blown away by Eddie Van Halen, Neil Schon, and Steve Lukather, and I still adore their playing. But it was more than the playing. As a kid, long before I'd heard of the concept of a guitar hero or knew what you could do on a guitar or had heard of any famous players, I fell in love with songs. The music that I heard on the radio in the 70s and the 80s had a really big impact on me. I'm always going to appreciate great guitar playing, but if it's wrapped up in a great song, that's my happy place. Some of my favourite music doesn't even have guitar. I think it's always been the case, but especially as I get older, I just want to be moved. And sometimes that's through a song with a piano and a vocal. Other times it might be a guitar instrumental. It could be a hard rock anthem or a movie soundtrack. It might be a country song or a jazz song. I love it all, but it's always the song that gets me. When I finished high school, I knew that I wanted to work with music in some capacity, and if it could involve the guitar, even better. I worked for a short time as a studio assistant at one of the main recording studios here in Sydney, and then as a technical assistant at a music tech design and repair firm, which was my favourite job ever, and I'm sure I'll talk about that in future videos. During this time, I started teaching guitar in the evenings, and it just grew. I went full-time with it fairly quickly, and before too long I was teaching like 65 students a week at its busiest periods. In the years since, I've gigged occasionally, I've recorded demos for people, I've done session work, I've helped people with their pedal boards and rigs and things like that. But for the most part, I've pretty much been the typical suburban guitar teacher. I've always loved music creation and production and recording studios. My first memories of actually being in a recording studio were when my dad organised for a friend and me to visit a studio owned by one of his friends. And the time I got to cut a demo in my first year of high school. Hearing myself on playback the first time was just magical. In senior high, I had a Fostex X15 4-track and started dabbling in recording myself. And by the early 90s, I was really getting into it, and I had a Tascam 688 8-track synced up to an Atari computer running Notator. Yeah, I was really getting into it by this stage. And in 2000, I made the switch to a Mac running Logic Pro, and that's pretty much what I've been using ever since. I just love spitballing musical ideas and seeing tracks come together. Never gets old. Well, first of all, I love music and I love the guitar. I love listening to music. I love playing and creating music. Of course, I love seeing live music. But the other thing I love to do is to talk about music. Anytime friends and I get into conversations, anything music or guitar related, minutes feel like seconds. So to make videos about these things that I'm passionate about is something I'm excited to do. And I hope that they connect with you and that you enjoy them. I also like the idea of YouTube being a place where I can share music that I make or collaborate with others on, whether that be performing finished material or documenting the creation and recording and production stages. And finally, I hope to connect with fellow guitar players and musicians and music lovers, maybe even other music YouTubers, just through talking about these things that we all love. There's a bunch of things I'd love to do on this channel. In no particular order, tutorials on music and guitar playing, including theory, technique, mindset, and more. Gear tutorials and demos, solo and song breakdowns. There's some stories I'd love to tell. Maybe videos on recording guitar. There's a bunch of musicians and music industry people and friends in the industry that I would love to feature and interview. So basically a guitar music channel with tutorials and recording and gear and conversations and a whole lot more. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, I hope that you'll join me and come along for the ride. It would mean a lot to me if you would like this video and subscribe so you don't miss out on any future videos. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to watch my first YouTube video. My name's David Smith and I hope to see you on a future video real soon. See ya.